The Crusades were a series of religious wars sanctioned by the Latin Church during the medieval period, primarily aimed at recovering the Holy Land from Muslim rule. These wars, spanning from the late 11th to the late 13th centuries, played a crucial role in shaping the history of Europe and the Middle East, leaving a profound impact on the political, religious, and cultural landscape. Below is a comprehensive exploration of the Crusades, highlighting their causes, major campaigns, and their long-term effects on both Europe and the Islamic world. Background and causes. The Crusades were primarily motivated by religious and political factors. The primary goal was to recapture Jerusalem and other holy sites that had fallen under Muslim control. However, underlying this were several deeper issues. 1. Religious zeal. The Crusades were deeply rooted in the medieval Christian belief that war fought for a holy cause, particularly for the defense or reclamation of the Holy Land, was a justified and even righteous action. The Latin Church, particularly under the leadership of Pope Urban II, called for these wars as acts of religious penance and salvation. Christians believed that by taking up the cross and fighting in the Holy Land, they could earn salvation and forgiveness for their sins. 2. Papal authority. The rise of papal authority in Europe was another major factor. The Church sought to assert its dominance and influence over the secular rulers of Europe, and the Crusades provided a way to rally the Christian knights and kings behind a common cause. Pope Urban II's call for the First Crusade in 1095 was partly motivated by the desire to strengthen the papacy's political power by uniting Christian Europe under its spiritual leadership. 3. Feudalism and knights. The Crusades also offered an outlet for the excess energy of the feudal warrior class in Europe. During this time, Europe was rife with internal conflicts among feudal lords, and the Crusades provided an opportunity to redirect their militaristic tendencies towards a common enemy. Knights, bound by the code of chivalry and seeking both spiritual and material rewards, were eager to join these holy wars. 4. Byzantine Empire's call for aid. The Byzantine Empire, which had been losing territory to the Seljuk Turks, played a key role in sparking the Crusades. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos appealed to the West for military assistance, particularly after the Byzantine defeat at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, which saw the loss of much of Anatolia. Pope Urban II seized upon this request for help as an opportunity to rally Western Christendom to the cause of defending the Eastern Christian Empire and reclaiming the Holy Land. 5. Economic and territorial ambitions. While religious motivations were central, there were also significant economic and political reasons behind the Crusades. Many European nobles and knights saw the Crusades as an opportunity to gain wealth, land, and status. The Levant was viewed as a land of opportunity, offering rich rewards for those who could seize territory and control trade routes. The First Crusade, 1096–1099. The First Crusade was launched by Pope Urban II in 1095 at the Council of Clermont, where he called on Christians to take up arms and liberate Jerusalem from Muslim rule. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of knights, peasants, and clergy embarking on the journey to the Holy Land. The First Crusade was notable for being the most successful in achieving its immediate objective, the capture of Jerusalem. 1. People's Crusade. Before the official Crusade armies set out, an unorganized group of peasants, known as the People's Crusade, led by figures like Peter the Hermit, set off for the Holy Land. However, this group was poorly equipped and was mostly massacred by the Turks before reaching their destination. 2. The Siege of Antioch. One of the key battles of the First Crusade was the Siege of Antioch in 1097–1098. After a long and grueling siege, the Crusaders captured the city in June 1098. However, they soon found themselves besieged by a Muslim army, and only after desperate fighting and alleged divine intervention did they manage to hold on to the city. 3. The capture of Jerusalem. The most significant event of the First Crusade was the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. The Crusader army stormed the city and, after a brutal siege, took control. The massacre that followed was horrific, with Muslim and Jewish inhabitants slaughtered in large numbers. This event would reverberate throughout the Islamic world and leave a legacy of bitterness that persisted for centuries. Following the capture of Jerusalem, the Crusaders established several Crusader states, including the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli. These states were often fragile and constantly under threat from Muslim forces. The Second Crusade, 1147–1149. The Second Crusade was launched in response to the fall of the County of Edessa, one of the Crusader states, to Muslim forces in 1144. However, the Second Crusade was largely a failure. 1. European involvement. Unlike the First Crusade, which was primarily driven by knights and local lords, the Second Crusade saw the involvement of European kings, notably King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III of Germany. Despite this high-level participation, the Crusaders were plagued by poor planning, lack of coordination, and internal divisions. 2. Siege of Damascus. One of the main objectives of the Second Crusade was to capture Damascus, a key Muslim city. However, the Crusaders' siege of Damascus in 1148 ended in failure after just a few days, and the Crusaders were forced to retreat. This failure severely damaged the morale of the Crusaders and weakened their position in the Holy Land. The failure of the Second Crusade emboldened Muslim leaders, particularly Nuh ad-Din, the ruler of Aleppo and Damascus, who would go on to play a key role in the Muslim resistance against the Crusaders. The rise of Saladin and the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192. The most famous Muslim leader of the Crusades was Saladin, Salah ad-Din, a Kurdish military leader who became the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. Saladin united much of the Muslim world and launched a successful campaign to reclaim the Holy Land from the Crusaders. 1. Battle of Hattin. The turning point came in 1187 at the Battle of Hattin, where Saladin decisively defeated the Crusader forces and captured King Guy of Jerusalem. Following this victory, Saladin's forces went on to recapture Jerusalem later that year, an event that sent shockwaves through Christendom and led to calls for a new crusade. 2. The Third Crusade. The Third Crusade was launched in response to the fall of Jerusalem. It was led by three of the most powerful rulers in Europe, Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. Frederick died on the journey, but Richard and Philip continued on, though their relationship was often strained. Siege of Acre. One of the main successes of the Third Crusade was the capture of Acre in 1191 after a long siege. Acre became the new base of operations for the Crusaders. Richard and Saladin. The Third Crusade is perhaps best remembered for the rivalry between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. Despite fierce fighting, Richard was unable to recapture Jerusalem. However, the two leaders eventually negotiated a truce in 1192, allowing Christian pilgrims to visit the Holy Land while leaving Jerusalem under Muslim control. While the Third Crusade failed to achieve its primary goal of recapturing Jerusalem, it did strengthen the Crusader presence in the region and established a fragile peace between the two sides. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, and the sack of Constantinople. The Fourth Crusade is infamous for its diversion from its original goal of retaking Jerusalem. Instead, the Crusaders ended up sacking Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, in 1204. 1. Venetian influence. The Crusaders had made a deal with the Republic of Venice to provide ships for their journey to the Holy Land. However, the Crusaders were unable to pay the full amount, and the Venetians persuaded them to divert their attention to the city of Zara, a Christian city, as payment. 2. Sack of Constantinople. The Crusaders were then convinced by Alexios IV, a claimant to the Byzantine throne, to support his bid for power in Constantinople. When Alexios was overthrown, the Crusaders, frustrated and unpaid, turned on the city and sacked Constantinople in one of the most infamous events in medieval history. The city was looted, and a large portion of its treasures was taken to the west. The Byzantine Empire was fragmented, and the Latin Empire was established in its place. The Fourth Crusade deepened the divide between the Latin West and the Greek East, and the Byzantine Empire never fully recovered from the blow. The later Crusades and decline, 13th century. Following the Fourth Crusade, there were several more crusades, but none achieved the same level of success or significance as the earlier ones. 1. Fifth Crusade, 1217 to 1221. The Fifth Crusade was an attempt to recapture Egypt as a way to weaken the Muslim hold on the Holy Land. However, the Crusaders were ultimately defeated at the Siege of Damietta, and the campaign ended in failure. 2. Sixth Crusade, 1228 to 1229. The Sixth Crusade, led by the excommunicated Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, was unique in that it achieved success not through military conquest but through diplomacy. Frederick negotiated with the Muslim leader Al-Kamil, the nephew of Saladin, and secured a treaty in 1229 that returned Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Nazareth to Christian control for a period of 10 years. However, Frederick's success was short-lived, as the fragile peace fell apart after the treaty expired, and the city was recaptured by the Muslims in 1244. 3. Seventh Crusade, 1248 to 1254. The Seventh Crusade was led by King Louis IX of France, one of the most devout monarchs of the period. Louis embarked on a campaign to conquer Egypt, believing that this would weaken the Muslim forces and open the way to reclaiming Jerusalem. However, the crusade ended in disaster. Louis and his army were defeated and captured at the Battle of Al-Mansura in 1250. Louis was ransomed, but the defeat marked a significant blow to the Crusader cause. 4. Eighth Crusade, 1270. King Louis IX launched another crusade in 1270, this time targeting Tunis in North Africa. However, the campaign was short-lived, as Louis died of illness shortly after arriving in Tunisia. The crusade ended in failure, and with Louis's death, the enthusiasm for future crusades waned significantly. 5. Ninth Crusade, 1271–1272. The Ninth Crusade, led by Prince Edward of England, later Edward I, was the last significant crusade to the Holy Land. Although Edward achieved some minor victories, the crusade ultimately failed to achieve its objectives, and by 1291, the last remaining Crusader stronghold in the Holy Land, Acre, fell to the Muslim forces. Consequences and legacy of the Crusades. The Crusades had a profound and lasting impact on both Europe and the Middle East. While the military campaigns themselves ultimately failed to establish long-term Christian control over the Holy Land, the legacy of the Crusades can be seen in various aspects of European and Middle Eastern history. 1. Religious and cultural impact. The Crusades significantly deepened the divide between Christianity and Islam. The atrocities committed by both sides during the Crusades, such as the massacre of Muslims and Jews in Jerusalem during the First Crusade and the brutal treatment of Christian prisoners by Muslim forces, left a legacy of bitterness and hostility that would persist for centuries. In Europe, the Crusades helped to reinforce the power and influence of the Church. Crusading became a key aspect of medieval Christian life, with the concept of holy war becoming deeply ingrained in the religious consciousness of the time. The idea of the crusade was also used by the papacy in later centuries for campaigns against heretics and non-Christians, such as the Albigensian Crusade against the Cathars in southern France and the Northern Crusades against pagan peoples in the Baltic region. The Crusades also led to increased interaction between the Christian and Muslim worlds, which had some positive effects. Despite the conflict, the Crusades facilitated cultural exchange. Europeans were exposed to new ideas, technologies, and goods from the East, including advances in medicine, science, and mathematics, as well as luxury goods such as spices, silks, and porcelain. This interaction would later contribute to the European Renaissance. 2. Political and military consequences. The Crusades had significant political consequences for Europe and the Byzantine Empire. For the Byzantine Empire, the Fourth Crusade was a disaster, as it led to the sacking of Constantinople and the establishment of the Latin Empire. The Byzantine Empire never fully recovered, and its weakened state made it vulnerable to later conquest by the Ottoman Turks in 1453. In Western Europe, the Crusades contributed to the rise of centralized monarchies. The participation of many European nobles in the Crusades often weakened their local power bases, as they sold or mortgaged their lands to finance their campaigns. This, in turn, allowed kings to consolidate power and establish stronger centralized governments. The Crusades also had a lasting impact on European military techniques. The experience of fighting in the Holy Land against Muslim forces led to improvements in siege warfare, the use of cavalry, and the development of new military tactics. European knights also adopted some of the weapons and armor used by their Muslim counterparts, such as the crossbow and mail armor. 3. Economic effects. The Crusades had a profound impact on the European economy, particularly in terms of trade. The demand for goods from the East, such as spices, textiles, and precious metals, increased significantly during and after the Crusades. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa, which played key roles in transporting Crusaders to the Holy Land, became wealthy and powerful through their control of Mediterranean trade routes. The Crusades also helped to stimulate the growth of banking and financial institutions. Crusaders often needed to borrow large sums of money to finance their expeditions, leading to the rise of lending practices and the development of more sophisticated financial instruments, such as letters of credit. 4. Impact on the Muslim world. For the Muslim world, the Crusades were both a military challenge and a unifying force. While the initial Muslim response to the Crusades was fragmented, leaders like Saladin were able to unite Muslim factions under the banner of jihad, or holy war, against the Christian invaders. The Crusades reinforced the idea of defending Islamic lands from Christian aggression, which became a recurring theme in later Islamic history. The Crusades also contributed to the eventual decline of the Crusader states in the Levant. Muslim leaders like Zengi, Nuh ad-Din, Saladin, and later the Mamluk sultans of Egypt systematically chipped away at Crusader territories, culminating in the fall of Acre in 1291, which marked the end of the Crusader presence in the Holy Land. The Crusades were a complex and multifaceted series of events that had a profound impact on the history of Europe and the Middle East. While they failed to achieve their primary goal of securing permanent Christian control over the Holy Land, the Crusades played a key role in shaping the political, religious, and cultural landscape of the medieval world. The legacy of the Crusades can still be felt today, as they continue to influence modern discussions about religious conflict, holy war, and the relationship between the West and the Islamic world. From the rise of papal authority to the creation of new trade routes, from the cultural exchanges between East and West to the long-standing enmity between Christians and Muslims, the Crusades left an indelible mark on world history. Despite their many failures, the Crusades stand as one of the most significant episodes in the history of medieval Europe and the broader Mediterranean world.